Welcome to the Daily Objective. It's day 14 of the war in Israel. We are continuing our coverage. Today we'll talk about the protests and the support for the Palestinians or Hamas, which to me are one and the same, in the context of anti-Semitism. Is it anti-Semitism on the part of again, particularly people in the West? We'll get to that in a minute. First, some updates from the situation in Israel. So the rocket attacks from the north continue. There have been more today. Again, something like 20 or 30. Hezbollah is not going all in just yet, but they are showing their presence. There was one terrorist who infiltrated, most likely from Lebanon, although they don't have conclusive evidence, but it was very far in the north of Israel, so it's unlikely it was somebody from elsewhere. He injured one soldier, and then he was neutralized, as they say in Israel, which is a nice way of saying he will no longer bother anybody. The U.S. Hasn't yet approved, I think, but is about to approve a major support package for Israel of something like $10 billion. I think some of the issues is Biden is wants to tie it in with support for Ukraine. You would think that that's not such a difficult sell, but somehow I think there are quite a few in the Republican Party who are happy to support Israel, but not Ukraine, which kind of begs the question, why? Like, how do you make that distinction? And I wonder if it's kind of, many on the left will side with the underdog, no matter who the underdog is. I'm wondering if that's the Republicans doing kind of the opposite and thinking, okay, Israel is stronger, Russia is stronger. That's speculation on my part. They may not be sophisticated enough to think that way, so it could be that I'm wrong. Yeah, I think those are the major updates. Let me look if there's something I missed out on. I think there's politicians around the world saying things. I don't think many of them deserve for us to waste our precious time here talking about them. There will be a ground operation, which is when I think there will be many more updates. Of course, Israel isn't going to announce the time and day of the operation. I will be surprised if we sit here Monday on the Daily Objective and the operation hadn't started. I won't be surprised if it starts in the next few hours. I think it's imminent. I think one of the reasons that this was delayed is because, again, they recruited so many soldiers and they didn't have enough equipment for everybody. So I think that is all but solved, at least for the people who are going in. So that's going to happen. And I've said, and I still think so, that I'm very concerned about what Hamas is planning for the Israelis that go into Gaza. I'm also somewhat curious to see what Israel is planning. Hopefully that is something that will achieve the necessary goals and even the stated goal of the operation. But one thing you can expect once the ground operation starts, we talked about the hospital thing and how the misinformation was immediately reported as news. The Gaza Health Ministry is a nice way of saying, the people who committed the atrocities, this is what they're telling us. And when you see numbers, by the way, not just about the hospitals, and you see the number of supposed dead in Gaza, those numbers are coming from Hamas. All of those numbers. So they are, there's two things you can know for certain. One is that it's a lie. And the other is whatever the numbers are, they are too low. You will get a lot more of Hamas, propaganda reported as news in Western media outlets once this ground operation starts. And you will get undoubtedly way more protests. And which brings us to the topic of today, which is it anti-Semitism on the part of the protesters? To what extent is it? Yeah, okay, let's leave it at that, and I'll go to you, James. I have something I want to share soon, but yeah, let's go to you and your thoughts just generally on the topic.
Well, we just had the discussion about the congresswomen from the United States, for example, and I think their case is obviously clear. They are dripping with hatred for Jews as such. I think it's hard not to see the racism just spilling over in an ugly way when it comes to people of that ilk. It's the more moderate types that, as I say, there's a whole swath of other members of the Congress who say, well, there should be a ceasefire, but they still claim Israel has, quote, something like a right to defend itself. I don't see how they square that circle. So there are people in that sort of contradictory middle. When you talk about the protesters, say the university protesters or the Palestinian protesters, the demonstrators in front of Israeli and American embassies across the world, it's getting ugly in front of embassies across the world, Israeli embassies and consulates, American embassies and consulates. I think a great deal of that is anti-Semitism. Europe, if my country, if the New World has a horrific record when it comes to African slavery, Europe has a disgusting record when it comes to anti-Semitism. As everyone even vaguely familiar with the history of the last 1,500 years in Europe knows, European Christians really have a disgusting, shameful, murderous record of pogroms and genocides that go all the way up to the 20th century, mind you. I would think that there'd be a little more self-reflection. But, as Nikos Satirikopoulos, the ARI has reposted his amazing speech, Why the Left Hates Israel. I urge everyone to go check that out. It is, I think, in part anti-Semitism, but I think there are deeper ideological reasons for a lot of these intellectuals, historical reasons that hate capitalism, hatred, in effect, anti-Enlightenment thinking. Of all the religions in the West, Judaism has more embraced the Enlightenment with Reform Judaism under Moses Mendelssohn. The whole advent of Reform Judaism created the most secular religion, frankly, in the world, the most this worldly embrace of all the religions. Reform Judaism more embraced the Enlightenment. I think that is intellectually, honestly, a major source of resentment against Jews and Israel. I'll go further. Throughout Christian history, Christians couldn't charge interest on loans, and Jews were the bankers in Europe for many, many centuries until Christians started looking the other way and ignoring Jesus about charging interest on loans. But this created a huge resentment against the greed of Jewish bankers and so forth. So this is an anti-capitalist, anti-profit thing too. Jews in many Christian minds are associated with both the Enlightenment and secularism and profit and money making in a way that other groups are not. And I think that is a lot of the roots of this anti-Semitism. And it's interesting because it's more than anti-Semitism. It's a philosophical opposition to the Enlightenment or to capitalism with which Jews are associated, quite frankly.
Yeah.
Sure.
You mentioned Nikos's talk, which of course I encourage everybody to watch, and it is going viral on YouTube, at least by objectivist standards. It's last I checked, it was over 150,000 views. I'd also mention a talk by Yaron Brook, Anti-Semitism and Anti-Capitalism, or the other way around, but which he gave on
Which is the point I'm making here.
Yeah.
Yaron is much more articulate on Israel than anyone out there. He's the best commentator on this, and he's putting the same point that I'm vaguely referring to here. So do check out those talks.
Yeah, I think that video might be available, and he may have given it twice. I know one of those times was in. I definitely gave it at least twice, but one of those times he gave that talk was at an ARCUK event in 2019. That's on ARI's YouTube channel, but yeah, you can see Yaron speaking here in London, about 5-minute walk from where I'm sitting.
What's more interesting lately is that, I don't associate far-right parties in Europe with being pro-Jewish. They have a shameful, as I indicated, history of anti-Semitism in the far right in Europe going way back. But I mean, Le Pen isn't she the offspring of a Holocaust denier? And what's that group in Germany, AfD, Aren't they always causing controversies about German history? And yet both have taken a very pro-Israel stance recently. I don't trust it, frankly. I think it may be their own immigration. They want to create, an anti-Islam immigration position, and I think they perceive it as helping them in that regard. So I'm not sure I trust the far right, but it's the left, let's face it, that are the real voices against Israel right now. I mean, I think if Britain wants to repeat the Jeremy Corbyn disaster of 2019, where I think that anti-Semitic, anti-Israel labor members that he allowed to fester in his Labor Party played into the defeat of the Labor Party a few years ago. I don't know if that would repeat itself. Hopefully, the British population would be more distressed at that kind of anti-Semitism in the Labor Party. But I think, as Nikos points out, the real anti-Israel voices today are coming from the left. Although I say I don't trust those pro-Israel voices on the right either. That American far right guy we talked about, Nick Fuentes, he's an alt-right, far right guy, mind you. But remember what he said about the Republican Party. They're controlled by, quote, Jews and homosexuals. So I don't trust these far right guys in their current embrace of, the situation right now. I think it could be strategic on their part, tactical actually on their part. But the left are the ones with the ugly anti-Jewish voices that I hear these days.
Yeah, I want to thank our super chatters real quick. Robert Naser, Ashley Shrugged, and Jason Adams and Jeff Bannister. It's good that you mentioned the historical context, that how prevalent anti-Semitism has been in Europe, regardless of, from the Dark Ages, pre-Enlightenment, post-Enlightenment. The one thing that always, the one thing that's constant in Europe is anti-Semitism, and it is still very much here,
well, as readers of my book will know, it goes back to the actual earliest literature of Christianity, to their very roots. They killed Jesus. You Jews killed Jesus, don't you know? And that has informed Christianity for the last, more than 1,500 years. But as I say, I think there are more recent philosophical things. Jews are associated with capitalism. Jews are more embraced secularism and the Enlightenment with Reform Judaism, as I say, with Moses Mendelssohn than any other Western religion. And so there's a good deal of resentment against reason and capitalism that's built into this anti-Semitism. The deeper
and by the way, for people who aren't readers of your book, it is Creating Christ. That is available on Amazon, I believe, and other fine booksellers. So now there's a Jewish state, and there's it's kind of easy in a sense to say, well, I'm not against the Jews, I'm just against the state, which is, it's interesting on many levels, because people accuse Israel of doing the things that those people seem to support, and it's a very specific hatred. Like when Russia invaded Ukraine, there were some protests. There was nothing like the pro Hamas or anti-Israel protests. You don't see these protests against oppressive regimes that oppress their own people. Again, there are some protests about Iran when people in Iran were actually protesting and risking their life, and in some cases getting killed to oppose the regime. You just see this about Israel. You see this about Israel again. It's so telling that this happened on October 7th, that cities were filled on October 7th with people protesting, because there is no way you can say that is anything other than expression of support for the acts of savagery that we saw that day. And once you get to that point where this is what you support, I actually don't think it matters that much if it's anti-Semitism or what. These people should be, considered, at least on a personal level. A good person should not ever engage with such people.
No, but to choose the Yom Kippur period, to do it at Shabbat. I am not from Jewish background at all. I was raised by liberal Presbyterians in America. For me, it is not an ethnic or tribal issue at all. It is a question of civilization. It is a question of who are the defender. We can talk about compared to what scenarios. We can say, oh, it's a Jewish state, and we can quibble. And so many people say, You see, it's not, there's something fundamentally wrong because of the quote Jewish state. I would remind people, as I did in the chat yesterday, Great Britain has an official religion. The question is, does Britain have freedom of religion? And when you look at Israel, as I have pointed out again and again, they have comparative freedom of speech, freedom of religion. Do you think it's legal to be a Christian or a Jew in Saudi Arabia or Iran? What do you think they do to blasphemers? No, we're talking, compared to what standard, it's not even close. We're talking about civilization, an island, an outpost of civilization in a sea of medieval barbarism and theocratic madness and racism. And can't see it with that clarity in the West, then I do, in every case, suspect that there's something deeper going on about capitalism, reason, and how those things are associated with the Jews in so many Western minds.
I will just say, yeah, by the way, there is a Jewish community in Iran. Now, it's a small community, it's a ghetto community, Saudi Arabia has these, Western, like enclaves. You have these, these totalitarian regimes, can't completely follow their ideas to their fullest extent. So they have their ways of getting away with it. There's ways you mentioned, the issue of interest. I know in Islam that's a big deal, but there's also types of Islamic banking, which I asked somebody to explain to me once. I couldn't really figure it out, but it is, it's a way of doing what you're not supposed to do. Before we get to Marvin's super chat from yesterday and then Marvin's super chat from today, I want to say there's this, we've mentioned at the moment we're not doing sponsored episodes, which of course is why we also appreciate the additional super chats that we've been getting. But this is not a organization that is sponsoring us, nor do I necessarily agree with everything they say. But I've been looking at tweets from a group called Stop Antisemitism, and I recommend looking at their Twitter. At least I haven't looked into them much beyond that. And Daniel, if you can put the link in the chat to their Twitter. One thing they've been doing is, there's people going around attacking Jews nowadays in Western countries. There are people taking down posters of the hostages that people are putting up. So there's really despicable acts, and luckily some of these acts are caught on camera, and the faces are seen, and so they tweet them out. Sometimes they find the person, they find out who it is, and some of these people have jobs, and some of these people no longer have jobs, which I think is a very good thing. So yeah, sometimes an organization hires somebody and they're not necessarily knowledgeable about everything this person does when they're not at work. And it's good to be able to see this. I encourage people to go there, to share this, to see if there's anybody there, you can, of course, consider your future relationship with them. So that's one of the positives that I've seen. It's hard to say it's positive because whenever I go on their Twitter, you see those vile people doing their thing, but it's positive that we see them, that they're on camera, and we can call them out. Okay, Marvin's super chat from yesterday. What is the right emotion to feel when seeing an enemy city being bombed? Justice is served, but war is still something you didn't get into voluntarily. Joy, indifference, anger seem all wrong.
I don't think that's the right question. I mean, my first thought is that when I use force, I'm going to be very careful in being rational about it. And if my emotions are consistent with that, obviously I will have a certain value reactions to things. Now, I don't like to see babies die, children die anywhere at any time. It horrifies me. But the emotion is where I place the blame. The emotion is what is the object and the subject of my emotion here. And if I'm not going to feel joy when babies die or hospitals get, I was a prosecutor for many years. As a prosecutor, what we did is we came in and we cleaned up what was already an evil, bad situation. Somebody got murdered, somebody got raped. And so when you get a guilty verdict, I don't jump for joy, but you feel a sense of relief. You feel this sense, the jury comes back guilty on murder. What do you feel? What do you feel? You feel relief. Thank God this injustice did not go unresponded to. Thank God the victims have some justice in this case. Thank God this monster won't be out there to kill some more. So when I see Palestinians being killed in Gaza, what my normal feel, now remember, a majority of them did vote Hamas in, and a great many others are in favor of other Islamic monster groups out there. So I'm not sure how to feel about, quote, innocence in Palestine. But even given the fact that I know there are children, I know there are babies out there, I know there are people in hospitals who are going to get hurt and killed, I'm going to place the blame on Hamas, frankly, when I feel the horror of children getting killed, because it's their fault, 100%. But what I'm going to feel in general when I see Hamas, these monsters die, is not going to be sadness. No, it's going to be a sense of relief, a relief that these monsters aren't going to be out there killing more people. As this sense of, if we ever have some justice, I'm going to get after a guilty verdict, that sense of, oh, thank God, this manifest injustice did not go unresponded to. Thank God this monster is no longer out there to commit more crimes. It's more a sense of relief than a sense of, hey, jump for joy, jump for joy. No, sir. Am I going to feel sad when babies get killed? Of course. But I'm going to put the emotion of anger about that where it belongs on Hamas. But just to back up further, I don't use my emotions as the standard of evaluation here. There is part of me that would want to, let me put it this way. When I hear about a Hamas leader getting killed, there's something in me that wants to jump for joy. Excuse the language almost. I'm letting my emotion almost come out there. But am I aware that that is an emotion and that's my evaluation? Yeah, I absolutely am. Is that going to be dictating my actions though? No. But inside, when I hear about the death of a Hamas leader, am I going to confess to you that I feel joy? Yeah, I do. I do. These are monsters. Remember what they did tonight, 14 days ago.
Yeah. Yesterday before.
I didn't mean to make that a psychological confession or anything, but that's how I feel about it.
Before the show yesterday, I asked you and Daniel about a tweet that I had tweeted that morning because somebody, senior figure in Hamas was killed, Jamila Al-Shanti, who was the wife of Abdelaziz Rantisi, who was the one of the founders of Hamas and the leader. And it's whether or not I should have tweeted it is something is a different question. But yeah, I mean, certainly the immediate feeling I had when I saw that was good. This is a person who I don't want to live on this planet with.
It's a good thing when a Hamas leader gets killed, right?
Yeah, and now knowing that they surround themselves with kids is, in many cases, of course, is a sad thing. But the fact that this person will no longer be able to commit the atrocities that they live for is a good thing. Okay. We have a super chat from Jonathan Honig. Thank you. And Frank says, young protesters no longer remember Klinghoffer.
The name is familiar, but I can't, for some reason, I'm having a memory. That was the guy that was pushed off the ship.
Oh, yes. Leon.
That horrible anti-Semitic attack on that old guy in the wheelchair. Is that the case that he's reminding us of?
I was leaving it to you, but that actually I do remember. Yes, Leon Klinghoffer.
Oh yeah, obviously that targeted. I mean, so much violence. I mean, in my country, it exists. Do you realize that in my country, hate crimes against Jewish people are the most prevalent hate crimes? The Federal Justice Department keeps track of crimes that are motivated by racism, discrimination on the basis of race, sex, and religion. And they're called hate crimes, right? And they keep a track of it. By far, the biggest victim of hate crimes in America are Jews. Synagogues get attacked. Jews get violently attacked. Where there's religious and ethnic violence in the United States in the 21st century, it's mostly targeted against Jews. And there is a ugly anti-Jewish racism out there. You can see it when terrorists, they'll just go out of their way to pick on the Jewish person. Now think about that for a second. There's got to be some deep and abiding hatred, racist hatred in your mind. Now, as I say, I think it's motivated maybe by not just traditionalist and cultural reasons, but deeper philosophical reasons. But when you put it all together, it amounts in the minds of many people to an ugly justification for racism and violent racism against particularly Jewish people.
Yeah, just quickly, I'm going to read from Wikipedia. So Leon Klinghoffer was an American man who was shot, killed, and thrown overboard from the cruise ship Achille Lauro by members of the Palestine Liberation Front who hijacked the ship in 1985. Okay, we have another super chat from Marvin. He says, should political speeches be passionate to set an emotional context for a country in war? Most today are emotionless. Would a speech like of Patrick Henry for the Revolutionary War be thinkable today?
Oh, there, I have to say, I have to agree. There, we have to use our emotions for the thing they are. There are motivators. One of the major functions of emotions for the human being as a biological entity is to help motivate them. So yeah, absolutely. When the emotion is justified, ladies and gentlemen, let yourself feel it. It is for real. It is right. These guys are monsters, and it should be a motivator. Now, again, let me use my example as being a former prosecutor. I realized that when I was arguing to a jury, I had to motivate them in two ways. I had to motivate them first with the argument of reason. Take the evidence, logically analyze it, show how it proves your case conclusively. And you got to convince them with the test of reason. But as you're convincing them with the test of reason, there's something inevitably going on else in their mind. They're evaluating it. And you have to acknowledge the evaluations on the part. So a good closing argument in a murder case mixes reason and emotion in the correctly integrated way. And if you're rational about it, you won't go overboard on the emotion or underboard on the emotion. You've got to get it. You've got to pitch the emotion at the appropriate level. Now I'm going to ask you, what is the appropriate pitched emotional level when babies are being slaughtered, beheaded, when children are being literally burnt? The forensics we get, some of these children were alive when they were being burnt. And the pathology shows that. I get them emotional when I say something like that. Children were burnt alive. Now, what is the appropriate affect? What is the appropriate emotion, ladies and gentlemen? And how should that emotion motivate us? When I think of the injustice here, I am going to think about what are the ways to get to it. And so I will trace it down to Iran. I will trace it down to Islamic fundamentalism. Yeah, my rational mind will appropriately identify the cause, but my emotions will help kick me in the tail so that I take the appropriate action. And I'm going to ask you again, what's the appropriate action in the face of what we saw 2 weeks ago?
Well, we are out of time, but I think we will see action, maybe not the fully appropriate action, soon, very, very soon. I don't know if by the time we're back here tomorrow or the day after, but I think it will be, it is about to happen. What is definitely about to happen is the reality show, which starts in about a minute. We'll talk about how Israel's diplomatic strategies have worked in recent years as we see them unfold today. Thanks, James. We will be back here with a Daily Objective tomorrow. Bye.
Bye-bye.